Hey guys, I'm Jeremy, and today I'll talk about my experience using my offset smoker for the second time. The first time I did some big ribs that turned out pretty decent, but I had some problems with the fire and whatnot. So this time I got I made sure I had wood, and I did a 5-pound brisket and smoked salmon. And I also did a little bit of this big pork shoulder that a guy had given me a couple months ago. So anyway, I hope some of these tips could help you because it's new to me too, so I'm kind of learning how I go. Like, you can just wing it, but it's good to get a couple ideas to know what's going on. So anyway, I bought this 5-pound brisket, or at least a 5-pound piece of beef at a large fish market downtown in Chengdu. So up on the second floor there's a bunch of different meat shops, and they have all kinds of imported things. And I actually translated in Chinese, the name for brisket, and he mentioned he didn't have it, but he had this big piece of meat that was from Brazil that was 5 pounds. So it's not the exact part, of the meat that's a brisket maybe, but I think it works fine. So yeah, I got that for $50 or something. So I brought that back home and defrosted it and stuff. I had a group of friends over, and for this one, I just put on some Montreal steak seasoning, which is basically salt, pepper, and some spices and things, a little bit of wine, and maybe some vinegar or something, but mostly just a Montreal steak seasoning. And then, yeah, I started up my offset smoker. The first time I just had charcoal, and charcoal's nice that it burns clean, but it's kind of hard to get over 200 degrees. And this you want around I guess 250 degrees or so, somewhere between 225 and 275. Of course, the temperature of the offset smoker is going to go up and down anyway, so it's not perfect. So I put some of the wood I got in there, and of course, as you know, if you make a fire, there's a lot of smoke, and as it's getting hot, and then once the flames start, there's less smoke, but of course the temperature goes up quite high. So this was, around 200, let's say, and then once those flames start going, it'll get way over 300, 400, or whatever. So you gotta wait for that to cool down and stuff. So that's a little bit of a challenge. It's gonna always go up and down depending on when those logs start on fire, or chips, or whatever you have. So that's something I had to play with over the 6 or 7 hours I cooked it. They say you should cook about an hour each pound. So it's 5 pounds, I figured 5-6 hours or so. For a while it was kind of lower, probably 2 to 225, then it was a little higher later. I guess overall it was around 250. Now there's one kind of thing that I didn't really know too much about. I've cooked steaks over the years a million times, but I never smoked a 5-pound piece of meat on a smoker. And so there's a term called a stalling, okay? And I thought that this was more of something like the grill or the fire or something stalls, it can only get so high. But what it's referring to is the actual meat won't get above a certain temperature. So it gets around 150 to 175, and it won't heat up anymore. Because what happens to the meat is that it's kind of if you're running or doing something, of course you sweat. Well, this is in the oven and it's sweating, right? It's evaporating, and eventually, because most of the meat is 60% water, right? So it'll start shedding off this water, and then the temperature won't raise. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think after about 4 or 5 hours, I didn't notice it evaporating too much, so I was a little concerned that it wasn't heating as much as I wanted inside. Now I did put a pan of water in there, so I didn't want it, so it didn't get too dry basically. So maybe that helps in some ways. So yeah, you're gonna wanna make sure you have your digital temperature gauge for this, because I generally just wing everything over the years, but this is one of the few things, you wanna make sure you know what the temperature of meat is, and if you're stuck in this stall, this stall I guess could last for 5-6 hours. You get stuck like that, and it won't rise up and it won't cook through. So you're gonna wanna know what's going on with that. So make sure you have your temperature gauge, and not like me where I was oh, I have one, but the battery's not working. And after about 5 hours or so, or maybe even 6 hours, I wrapped it in the foil, because then you let it sit for about an hour on the counter, because it's still cooking. You don't want to cut it right away, or all of the water and stuff comes out. And actually, I was hoping that by wrapping it, it would cook more and some of the water would come out, but I was hoping for it to be more juicy, and it was a little bit dry, even though it was still really good. It was a little bit pink in a lot of areas, so it was basically medium in the thinner parts and medium rare or rare in some of the bigger parts. So it worked out great. Everyone thought it tasted good. It had a great smoked flavor. And yeah, my only complaint was it was a little bit dry, but other than that, it was really nice and it was definitely really good. I didn't cut off any extra parts. I just kind of kept it how it was. There wasn't too much fat on it anyway, so it seemed like a pretty good cut. So for the pork shoulder, I actually got this from a place I do tours all the time. There's this really nice waterfall, and I brought out several tours out to this guy's place. It's about, 3 or 4 hours from Chengdu, near Ya'an. And because I've brought all these guests and stuff over many trips, he's given me tea and stuff before, and this time he like pulled out of the shoulder this huge like pork shoulder or something like that. And so I was assuming actually there was quite a lot of meat on it, because as you can see, it's huge. And I didn't have the room to smoke that as well the same night, but I was like, I'll cook that too because I want to get rid of it. It takes up so much room in my fridge. And so I boiled that mostly, which is what the guy suggested to me, because I asked him when he gave me. I was like, okay, what do I do with this? Do I barbecue it? Do I, what am I supposed to do with it? And he mentioned I should boil it. So I had that boiling while the other stuff was smoking. And then when I took the steak out and wrapped it and let that sit for an hour, then I put that on for an hour to get like a little bit of a smoked flavor. So that pork itself is actually, I guess they hang it out to dry and smoke it anyway a bit. So it's already cooked a bit. So I didn't even need to like really cook it that long, just kind of reheat it, make sure it's kind of clean and stuff like that. And actually, after I cut into it, it's mostly fat, unfortunately. Here they use it, it's actually a dish called laro, which is like basically pork. I'm not sure what la means, but maybe it's like the smoked flavor or something. There's some regular pieces of meat on there, but it's mostly fat, like 85–90%. So that's better if you're gonna cook that like with some vegetables or mix that fat and that stuff with other things. You don't just eat that by itself. So that was a little bit of a waste. I did eat as much as I could, but not really super into pieces of fat, obviously. So that stuff turned out really nice. I made some potato salad and had some bread and stuff for that stuff, and everyone had a good time and really enjoyed. And then a few days later, I figured I'd try out the salmon, which is a little easier, at least as far as time goes, because you have to cook the big brisket for several hours, and the salmon you can do in 2 or 3 hours. So we had gone out for a bike trip, and I came back, threw that in there for about 3 hours, I think. And that worked out really well. On that one, I just put some mayonnaise, and I used the same Montreal steak seasoning on that one, and some hot sauce, which I don't think is like very standard for people to do that. I think most people would just maybe put oil or something like that, and then put like salt and pepper or different things. But it worked out really well. Everyone thought it was really good, and it wasn't too dry or anything like that. Of course, salmon itself has fat and oil inside than the brisket I was using before. So yeah, it was great. And same thing with that one, the temperature's going way up, then it's way down. Just one other thing to consider too, like, of course, when you're looking at the temperature gauge, it's at the top of the oven. So maybe it says it's 300, but that doesn't mean that everything below there is quite as hot as there, because of course heat rises. So if that's 300, maybe the things in the oven that are lower are like 275 or something like that. So I didn't mind keeping it a little higher temperature for a bit, just to make it cook through. When I did those ribs the first time about a month ago, I did put a salmon on a bottom layer, and it didn't get too much heat and was a little bit raw, which of course for salmons is okay, but I did want this more cooked. So I was like, I'll make sure the temperature's a little higher. I'll go for about 3 hours before I took it off, and it was great. And that one, I didn't really have to wrap in aluminum foil or anything. I did have aluminum foil just so it didn't stick to the grill or anything like that, but I didn't need to wrap that, and it turned out really good. So yeah, I'd recommend using this stuff in the future. It's been a lot of fun for me. I hope this video helped you out a little bit with a few tips. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.